just wanted to say thanks for giving this time. I know that in many centers, you may be approaching nap time or quiet time or just having a few moments where you can gather your thoughts. And if you're choosing to be a part of this and you're not in a space where you can gather your thoughts, which I know is like providing care, I just want to say thank you for allowing this to be one of the pieces that you juggle. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time talking about how early learning educators can help shape behavior. And I want to clarify because you cannot control behavior. Think about it like you're setting the stage. You can set the stage for success. And that's what we do with the science and the child development skills that we know, because what we want to be able to do is to help them thrive and help not only our students and children thrive, but also our teachers thrive alongside us. And there's things that we know from the research, not only that, but from just some practical work that we do in our centers that really do make a difference. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of those really practical things. Now, I'm going to talk about just some strategies to use, but I want to remind us about this right here, that it really starts with our heart. Because if we can take and have a heart for the children that we're serving, and we combine that with a head full of strategies, then what we have is we do have healthy and happy children and happy teachers. It takes both, because none of us are robots and we cannot just try to grit our teeth and survive. We've got to grab all of this stuff and allow it to flow from the inside out, because our children, they can really see that too. So we want to make sure that we can show up in those ways. But I want to do a disclaimer. And really, this is just kind of putting it out there. I'm never saying that it's the adult's fault, but what I am saying, and Sam talks about this many times, that it is the adult's responsibility. Children just don't change and grow on their own. What they need is a caring adult, a caring parent, a caring teacher, a caring director that's going to look at what's going on in the environment and say, what shifts can we make so that this child or these children can thrive? So an adult change always comes before a child change. It doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong. It just means that what needs to be done is different. So if we can put on the armor of, I can look at what I might do different, then that helps us get in that space so that we can be ready to try something new, rather than just complaining about what we've always done and why it doesn't work. So it all starts with adult change, and we're going to talk about that. And we're really breaking this up into 3 sections. We're going to talk about predicting and preparing, because having behavior problems is not a mystery, like they happen. Providing what we can provide, and then how we can partner, because it's in that partnering that we're able to really get some big shifts and big change and big outcomes for the kids that we have in our care. Now, here's one of the things in preparing and predicting and looking. When I walk into an early learning setting, when I walk into a classroom, I can stand there and really in about 15 minutes, I can get a feel for how the classroom is run. And I can get a feel for if this classroom is going to be likely to have behavior problems or likely to not have behavior problems. And really, I just encourage all of us to check our room temperature. So if you're an educator, you can do this and check your temperature. And if you're a director or an owner, you can go in and you can actually just get an assessment of all the classrooms in your building. And you can look at the way that we interact with all the children that are in the classroom. See, there's 3 main ways that we interact with the children that we're teaching and educating and developing. We're directing, which means we're telling them something to do. We're correcting, which means we're telling them what they did wrong. Or we're connecting, which means we're engaging with them without instruction and without correction. There's very little interactions outside of that. So again, directing means this is what I need you to do. Correcting means this is what you did wrong and I need you to do instead. And connecting is I see you and you're giving attention. So when I go into a classroom and let's say I just observe for 15 minutes and I listen, if I'm the educator or if I am the director, I'll listen to my teachers. And I'll just listen for 15 minutes and I'll have a little chart just like this. And every time they give a direction, I'll put a little mark. And every time they give a correction, put a little mark. And every time they engage where they're just giving attention just because, then I put a little tally in the connect place. And what that does is that gives us a feel for what's going on in the room so that we can know the environment that's being created. Because what we find, and let's even say this as adults, that there was somebody that I had in my counseling practice that every time I ran into her, she was always telling me the problems at the center. And every time she would come my way, she would tell me something that needed to be fixed. And every time she'd come my way, she would tell me something that was wrong. Well, without even thinking, when I would see her walk down the hall, I would begin to go to a different direction. It was this automatic response based upon the way that we related to one another. Well, the same thing happens on a micro level with the children that are in our classrooms. That if the only interaction that we have with these children is when they're doing something wrong, we're actually setting the stage to create more problem behaviors. If we are only interacting with the children when we're telling them to do something, then we're setting the stage, because what kids get attended to the most is what they tend to produce the most. So what I would do and look at and just recognize that in my room or in the rooms in my center, I just walk in and do a temp check. And that tells me, okay, what do we need to do and how might we adjust? Now, I want to be super clear, because sometimes people say, okay, Jason, are you telling me that I don't direct the kids or I don't correct the kids? I'm absolutely not saying that. There are times when you still tell the children what they need to do, you guide them along. There's still times in which you actually intervene when they're doing something wrong. I'm saying still do those things, those are necessary, but make sure you provide time for the connection, because that's where you're going to put the fertilizer, you're going to lay the groundwork for successful behaviors in the classroom. You want to make sure that you're paying attention to the most important parts. Actually, the literature, when you look at the research, when they talk about dealing with healthy, growing, thriving behaviors or difficult, problematic, aggressive behaviors, that you want to look at this 3-to-1 interaction, that you want to interact 3 times more often when you're engaging them without direction or correction than when you are. So you want to be able to look at that ratio. It's really impossible. There's one study that had it up to 8-to-1. Now, you can even think about how difficult, if you happen to have your own children at home, how difficult this is and what your interactions might be like when you are trying to get them to school in the morning. But you want to be able to keep that balance. You want to connect more than you're correcting and directing. So that means you really need to up that. And there's a lot of ways that you can connect. Like sometimes there's some real simple ones by just giving a high five or just a pat on the shoulder or a thumbs up signal from across the room. Like there's lots of ways, and it doesn't really matter the way. It just matters that there's an acknowledgement that they're there, that they're seen, and that you're actually full of joy that they're around. There was a study that just came out that looked at the types of interactions and what were most motivating to children. And they looked at it and they broke it up into super like behavioral oriented focus, like, oh, wow, you're really good at that. And then they looked at another group where they said to the children, oh my goodness, I love how you're working. And it was more emotionally focused. And then the third group is where they came in and they just simply just did a high five. They may have had some verbal content that was communicated, but it was just a simple acknowledgement that the child was there. And what they found is towards the latter two, acknowledging effort, not just outcomes, and acknowledging presence, actually had more positive effects on the student success and the tasks they're working on. That's a whole mouthful, but let me boil it down super simple. Just acknowledge the children in your room when they're not in trouble. And if you do that, you're going to set the stage for more successful behaviors, because the children know that they're seen. These are the same kids that are staying in our environment. And if they're only acknowledged when they're doing it wrong, when they become teenagers, they say, why do you only talk to me when I'm in trouble? We can set that stage when they're young and we can connect with them right there. So check your temperature. And here's the next thing. You want to get a common language. Now, as they get older, it can be more complex, but some of the centers that I work with, we keep it super simple, just 2 things. And it's the common language across the building with all classrooms. One of them is, hey, at here we have helping hands, and other ones we have honest feelings. See, when you're connecting or correcting or directing, whatever it may be, you can use these 2 things in your talk. And if we use it in the hallway, and if we use it in the classroom, if we use it outside, they can begin to know and understand. Because when we talk about helping hands, when you're doing your lessons, you can talk and describe what it looks like and what it doesn't look like, so that when you're connecting with them, you can talk about how you saw them use helping hands with their friends, and when there's times when they're not doing it wrong, then you have a discussion about how you can turn that into helping hands. So those are focused on the things that you do and the posture in which you do it. Because if our children can grow up and understand that their hands, and as they get older, their words are for helping, not hurting, then we've set them up for success. But it's more than just that. It's not just the outward behavior, it's also the inward feelings. And what we do is we talk about honest feelings, because at our center, we have permission to be honest with how we feel inside. See, we can tend to grow up in environments where we say, don't feel that way, don't be sad, don't be this, don't be mad, don't be. And then we leave that up to the children to figure out, okay, well, what do I do with these emotions and feelings? When really in early childhood settings, they're experiencing many of these emotions. And what they're trying to figure out is, okay, what do I do with this feeling inside that now has come out in a tantrum? And then how do I reintegrate back into the rest of the classroom because the other kids are staring at me? So we allow the freedom to feel the feelings, and then we teach the kids on how to turn them into helping hands, because sometimes our helping hands actually are for helping ourselves too. So it's okay to feel mad, and it's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to feel glad, and it's okay to feel all of those. And then we spend time describing them and talking about them, and what does it feel like in our tummy, and what does it feel like coming out of our mouths, and what does it feel like if we grit our teeth or squish our hands or whatever it may be. So rather than pretending that those feelings aren't there, we acknowledge those feelings, and we say, like many people say, all feelings are okay. Now we figure out what to do with them, because then our choices with our feelings, that's when we can figure out how to make those okay too. So we want to check the temperature of our rooms, but we also want to get a common language, because when you have new staff persons come in, or when children go from the 2-year-old class to the 3-year-old class, and the 3-year-old class to the 4-year-old class, if you have a common language across them all, then you have this momentum. It's kind of like a choir. A choir might have 60 people, and they might all be singing different notes, but they're singing the same song. So if you want to make a dramatic shift in your center, then get a common language, and then teach your team on how to use this, how to use your common language when you're correcting and you're directing and you're connecting. So then the children repeat to remember. I have a friend, he's this big burly guy. And one time I was walking through the parking lot, and he opened up the door to his truck, and he was singing Feels Like a Woman by Shania Twain. So our eyes met. It was awkward. We were laughing about it. And here's the funny truth about it. He knows all the lyrics to that song, and he sings it loud and proud because he heard it over and over and over again. He heard it in his truck. He heard it walking through the shopping mall. He heard it over somebody else playing it in their vehicle when they were at the beach. He just heard it over and over and over. And that's the power of this. Imagine your center with a child that starts young all the way until the time they're going to leave your care. And they've heard that we were created with helping hands, and it's okay to be honest with our feelings. And they've heard it for 3 years. Those children will have a social and emotional learning experience that's going to help them thrive when they go to that next level. So shaping behavior is not just about dealing with kids when they do it wrong. It's figuring out, what is my environment and what does that create? And then creating a common language that we can use across the center so that everyone's on board and our kids get to see what this looks like every year that they're apart. If you can do that, that actually, the data show that'll take care between 80 to 90% of the behavioral issues that you face. It just lowers that threshold of difficulty. So you want to adjust the temperature of your room, and using a common language is a great way to do that. So let's talk about what to provide, and let's start getting really specific, because you want to provide when children, let's say you're doing the common language, you've got a good behavioral interaction ratio. Well, you want to make sure that as an educator that you're not reacting, but you're responding, because those are two very different things, because we know when certain things are going to occur. they're predictable. They happen every year. When a new child starts in early learning, there's a chance for some separation anxiety, and that's going to manifest through lots of emotions and feelings and cryings and all kinds of stuff. Well, we shouldn't be surprised when it happens because we know it's going to happen. So what we want to do is we want to have a plan and take the time to create a plan rather than being surprised by something that we should know is going to happen and just reacting with whatever comes to mind in that moment. Here's some examples. Time of day. There are certain times of day that if there's a specific child that is having some behavioral difficulties, like they don't have those difficulties all day long from start to finish. Now, it may feel like it's happening all day long, but it doesn't happen all day long. So let's look at the times of day where it is most difficult, and let's create a plan for that moment. Maybe there's certain activities. Maybe this child has difficulty with some behavioral concerns when they're doing a certain activity, but when they're in center play, they're actually not struggling. So then we take that and we say, okay, let's create a response plan and let's figure it out. So let's dissect it. Okay, why is it working in this setting and why is it not working in that setting? And then we compare the two to find some common themes so that we can begin making some adjustments. So maybe it's a partner that they're doing a play or an activity with, maybe one that is chosen, or maybe one that's self-chosen. Maybe there's a sibling set nearby or family. I mean, there's all kinds of variables, but what we do is we take the time to look, to listen, to learn, to evaluate, to see what we can find. And then we can create a plan to respond rather than just commonly just reacting over and over. Time of year is another issue. So what we want to do is we want to identify, here's a real simple way to look at it. When children are misbehaving, when they're doing things that are not in their best interest or the interest of the kids in the classroom, rather than saying, okay, they're just choosing not to do this. They're choosing, because we attribute many times adult emotions to children's feelings and hearts, and they're actually not developed to that point. So we've got to be able to put ourselves in their shoes. And a lot of times I ask myself, okay, is this issue that the child is having, is it because they don't know how to do it? That's the point where we need to consider diversity and linguistic issues and cultural issues that sometimes they've just not experienced and they don't know how, whatever it might be. Could it be a when issue? Like they actually know how, they just don't know when. So we can look and say that there's a child that is running and then they're able to walk. And then we go into the hallway, and when we're into the hallway, they're still running. Well, we know that they're capable of walking, but what we do is we actually take the time and recognize that that's not a how issue, it's a when issue. So we take the time to teach them when we do these certain things rather than focusing on what they don't need to be doing. See, it's all about the focus of our attention. And we want to focus on the positive to get more of the positive rather than putting all of our attention on the negative that results in heavy attention on the negative cycles. We want to break them and do that by finding a skill. Could it be a where issue? Does the problem that we're facing, does it happen in every situation, in every location? Like I talked about in centers. Well, does it happen in all the centers, or does it happen in just the water center and the block center? So taking time to look at, okay, do they know how? Do they know when? Is it a where issue? Maybe there's certain places it happens and it doesn't happen. Or maybe it's a how much issue. Like they do it right in the right place at the right time, but the volume or the speed is too much. The reason why I want us to have this conversation about dissecting what's going on is because we tend to think all or nothing. It's all bad, all day, all the time, when really that's not true. And if we could start taking an all-day problem that I just don't know what to fix and break it down to meaningful, small little chunks and try to fix a chunk at a time, then those building blocks are going to be transformative. Now, there was a young boy that was 3 years old. They had thought that he might be on the autism spectrum, and he was nonverbal and he was running around the room all the time. And that's just what he did. He would run around the room. They would do carpet time, story time. and they would run, run, run. So when they called me in to help come up with a plan so this child could be successful, they're like, well, he's running all the time. He never sits still. Well, I said, okay, well, let's look at it. We went and looked and we found out that he was really running in two places. He was running during carpet time when they were doing story and singing activities. And then he was running in the cafeteria when they were all eating, or when they were eating in the room, and he was running around and he was putting his hands in everybody's food. Well, what we did was we focused just on the carpet time, the story time. And we created an intervention, I'll talk about it later, that actually it helped them sit during story time. But really what it did was it taught them how to communicate. And even though we weren't working on during lunchtime when they was eating, we were working just on story time because we focused on one place. We actually saw the benefit across all settings. So that's where I want to encourage you guys is it's not just about making a difference across the board all the time. Pick one space, identify like you see right here, and then focus on that one, because you're going to see it spread in a really wonderful way across the rest of them. You just have to keep going. And here's the thing, and talking about this little boy, all behavior is communication. Absolutely. That when I throw a tantrum, or I shut down, or I lay down, or I bite, or I hit, or I spit, or whatever it may be, I'm actually trying to communicate something to you. And a lot of times, as an early care worker, it's hard for me to not take that personal. But what I have to remind myself is I have to take it professional. So I have to take off how that felt, put it to the side, and say to myself, okay, what is this child trying to communicate? Because all behavior is communication. And what that is actually sending and receiving a message to accomplish some sort of a purpose. So the little guy that I was talking about, he was getting up and running because when we watched him, he would get up and run and he would go grab some toys and then he would play with the toys. Well, his running was saying, I want some toys. So what we did was we flipped it around and we looked at what was going on to determine the why about what was happening. Because if you can determine the why, then you can determine what to do about it. So let's show you with this young man. So there was a situation, it was carpet time, and they were wanting to do counting and stories and singing. And he got up and he ran because he got access to the toys. Well, what he did was he did it so much, the teachers just stopped chasing after him, and he got the toys and he got to play while everybody else didn't. What we wanted to do with him was say, okay, it's carpet time and you want to get access to the toys. So rather than running, we're going to teach you to raise your hand. So we watched him and we had this little guy. I said, okay, well, let him go. Let's see where he goes. And we watched him do it 5 to 10 times. And every time he went to get something, we would write down what he went to get. So we found the top 5 things that he ran for, and we put them in a little basket. So now we've got this little basket of toys. So then the teacher said, all right, it's time for carpet time. We're going to sing some songs. And she grabbed his hand and she walked him over and made some choo-choo sounds and had a great time. And then just guided him to a spot, and he sat down and he looked up at her and she did this. She raised her hand. Now he had the ability to imitate. So he looked at her and he kind of timidly raised his hand, and she handed him the basket of toys. And then he picked one of the toys out of the basket. So then she went and did carpet time. And then about 3 minutes in, which was a record for him to sit 3 minutes, he actually got up and ran to grab another toy. So her assistant walked over and grabbed his hand and said, it's time to sing, and took the toy, walked him back over to the carpet, sat him down. She looked at him and raised her hand, and he could imitate. He raised his hand and she gave the basket and he picked a toy out. And now it doesn't always work this fast, but what he learned was this: when I'm at carpet time and I raise my hand, I get access to the toy basket. And that's exactly what he did. He started raising his hand. And this was a nonverbal young boy that they thought was on the spectrum, but it really was just about communication. Nobody had taken the time to teach him different ways to communicate so that the adults can understand what you're wanting or requesting. And that's the young man that the same thing happened. He went in the cafeteria and raised his hand. And then we began to see verbal gains because he made the connection between a an intentional predictive response and an outcome. And he had never made that connection before. Now, that whole process is called functional communication training, and we don't have time to really dig deep into all of that. All that I want all of us to do is to understand this, that when we have children that are having behavior problems in our early learning settings, let's look at what they're doing. But more than just staying with what they're doing, okay, well, what was the situation before that? And then what was the outcome that they got? So instead of changing those things, which you can, let's teach them something to do instead, because that will give him or her the skills to be successful, not just in my classroom, but the next classroom that they go, and the next classroom where they go, and all the way up. So taking that time to just dissect the situation a little bit, and then find the skill, and then give them the skill in a way that they can learn and they can understand, so that they can thrive. Now, there are times when it's easier with verbal kids, and there's such a diversity in skill sets. So you start right where they are with what you can give them. I always like the idea of what I call a least intrusive intervention. What I mean is, don't do something super complex when the simplest thing is actually what's best. That's why it's really difficult when you just are sending kids out of your classroom to the director of the center. Because what happens is where do you go from there? Well, I mean, there's like 20 things that you can do between in your room and to the director. But if you jump straight to the director, then you can't go more maximum that, other than that child then is going to be sent home and not part of your program. So you want to start with the simplest, because you want to find is the simplest thing that I do, is that going to be effective with the children that I'm working with? So here's just some real simple, I'll give you just a ton of different ideas that you can use to respond when you have behavior problems in the classroom that could potentially shape the environment in a way that they could be more successful. And one of the things is just distraction. Maybe there's something that's going on in the room, and you're just, maybe what you do is you're just like, oh, everybody look up there. I see the blue color, and I see the red color, and I see the green color. So maybe there's something that was going on somewhere. And rather than saying, stop that, don't do that, then in that moment, you're just distracting them, and you're actually educating them in that moment. You're talking about colors, or there's just lots of things that you can do. So distraction is taking a moment to withdraw their attention from what's happening into a different space and a different place. It's not attending to a kid with a behavior problem. You're not even saying anything to that child. You're just creating a different environment. And another one could be redirection. Like maybe in your classroom, your children could be at the age where they could clap, and you clap, and then your children know to clap back in response. So all you've done is you've redirected the attention. And then you could go into your common language that you created, and you're like, I saw a bunch of helping hands right now, and I'm going to give my helping hands high fives. And you're walking around, you're giving helping hands high fives because you saw so many helping hands. So do you see how in that moment, you're not even saying to the kids, stop doing that. You're just doing a clap thing, redirecting everybody's attention, walking around the room, giving helping hands high fives, because some of the kids, you're actually, acknowledging that they had helping hands, and other kids, you're hoping that that helping hand high five rubs off on that hand that they were just using in an inappropriate way. So distraction, redirection. Another one is to provide choices. Now, it doesn't mean that they get 4 good choices. Sometimes you might say to a child, okay, it's time to go to the carpet. You can choose to be here, or you can choose to come and be a part and sing our happy songs, because whatever it may be. So you're giving them the sense of control so that they can actually make the decision for themselves. But you have to think through, what are you going to do, so that if they make the choice that's not what you want, you're ready to be able to respond to that. But many times providing a choice allows your children in your room to be successful, because they feel that autonomy. That's something that actually has been pretty helpful when you're looking at kids, especially coming through COVID, because what we found is that many of those children aren't in a space where they have had the opportunity where they've been required to do stuff. So giving them choices is something that is like a step from not actually been told to do anything, to now they have to thrive in a structured environment. Providing choices is a good mediating step and helping them to be successful in more structured activities. But there's also expressing concern, and it's a great strategy. This is really good when you have a child that is normally at this level, and then all of a sudden they're down here, or maybe they're normally here and all of a sudden they're up here, that you step in and you say, hey, I notice that you're helping hands, or I notice that you have honest feelings. And today your honest feelings seem to be really, really mad. Well, you're expressing concern and you're meeting them where they are so that they can feel heard and they can feel seen. Because maybe what they're trying to communicate through their actions was that they were mad, and you're acknowledging it, and they're not getting in trouble. They're not getting sent out. They feel the concern that you are expressing to them in a way that will positively impact their behavior. Another one that is actually used quite a bit is when someone is using an object or a playground piece or something that in a way that's not helpful, it's problematic or even dangerous. Rather than taking that child and putting the child in timeout, we take the item and we put the item in timeout. Okay, so here's a little bonus tip. If you have teenagers and you're dealing with teenagers and technology at home, there have been times when I've said to my teenagers, hey, you know what? Like, that's actually not okay. We're going to put your phone in timeout, because I don't want to deal with my teenager in timeout. That's not even appropriate for them. But putting their phone in timeout, it drastically changes everything. So that's an idea for teenagers. But for our children, there could be a toy or an activity or a puzzle or a fill in the blank, whatever it may be. Instead of putting them in timeout or putting them in trouble, you say to them, all right, well, because it's not safe using our tractors this way, we're going to put Tommy the tractor in timeout so that we can take a break and do something else. And then you move right on. So that's an option on how to shift the environment and to break a pattern that is actually a problem. You could actually restrict to a particular area. Like maybe you're outside and you have some playground equipment. Well, if there was something that was happening in one place that doesn't need to happen, you could say, okay, well, we still have playtime, but this play area is actually in timeout. So you have all the other areas right there that you can play. I found that when children are put in timeout, when they have recess or outdoor activities or gym activities indoors where they run and play, that actually is more punishment for the teacher than it is for the kids, because they need to be moving, they need to be interacting and jumping and all of that stuff. So instead of putting them in timeout, you put the area in timeout and then you allow them to choose from the other areas. So do you see how this continuum, like simple level is like redirection or distraction. Now we're moving down to stuff that's a little more intensive, like putting something in timeout or putting an area in timeout. So you now have these whole menu of options so that by the time you've done dealing with a behavior, you've moved down a scale with 5 or 6 things to really help shape the behavior so that they can be successful. Restitution, that means taking something that was wrong and make it right. And you teach them on how to make it right. Self-directed timeout, that you could create in your room a little cool space, like it could be take a break teepee, where you have, you might in America, like when we study the American West, they look at Native American structures that they would move, and a teepee is like a tent. So you might have a timeout teepee in the corner of your room, or something that's culturally relevant for where you are, where the child could say, oh, I've got honest feelings and my feelings are feeling this way. I'm going to go do a little timeout TP where I can just kind of cut away from the distractions and just have a few moments to collect my thoughts. Great skill to be able to teach. Proximity, that's another one. Cues and signals, that there might be a child that I know that when they go to this setting, they tend to escalate and get excited, and then their behavior gets to be too much. So we have some sort of a signal that we have with one another that prompts them to do something. Like it could be to breathe, squeeze, and smile. That when we go somewhere and they get really excited, I want them to breathe, squeeze their hands, and then smile, and see if that helps break the cycle. You just do what works for your kids, but I have a cue or signal that prompts them to do the thing that we talked about. Proximity, just walking around the room actually reduces behavior problems. That we find that the data has shown across all age groups that if the educator sits in one space, that there tends to be a higher percentage of behavioral issues in the spaces that cannot be seen or observed. So the mere fact of just getting up and walking around reduces behavior problems, and just the touch, a gentle touch, a pat. It's something that's affectionate in a way that as you go by or you're doing it, like a great would be a helping hands high five. That doing a helping hands high five is a great example of touch that actually gives attention and reinforces the good stuff. Now, I want to talk about partnering, because when we look at the reality of working with kids with behavior issues, this is what we know, is that as a staff, we need training. Like I just did like 14 behavior skills in like 5 minutes, and we could actually spend a lot of time going back through and going over all of those skills so that we could teach it so that everyone really knows it, and then they could start sharing it with each other. But the parents need the tools too. See, when you have two people working together, you get to places faster. And that's the same thing, that if you have, we call it wraparound, that if we've got a child that's having a specific struggle, that if at home they can be doing what we're doing at school, then you're going to get success so much faster, and everyone's going to be on the same page. So rather than parents and teachers being at odds with what's going on, we're actually on a collaborative team. But the whole goal is so that our children could thrive. So our staff needs a training, the parents need the tool, the children need to thrive. And then we want our centers to continue to grow, because we want to be known as that supported center that helps all children thrive. And we help equip parents to be able to thrive too. And we assume that many times it's because parents, they really struggle because they don't want to. They don't want to do it right. They don't want to be a parent. They don't want to do what it takes. But we as parents are just like our kids. Sometimes we don't know how, we don't know when or where. There's not a parenting handbook that you can pass out with a newborn baby that's going to tell you how to do feeding and how to do potty training and how to do all of the stuff. What do you do when your child bites? And that's where what we've done is we've taken these strategies like the ones that I've shared with you, and we've put them on the platform on Parent TV, that we've taken experts that across the field in feeding and biting and behavior and child development and connecting and all of this stuff. And we've pulled together these resources so that you can actually search up the answers, so that you can look and say, okay, well, what do you need help with today? And you search it up, and then videos will pop up that help give you 3 to 5 minute education, 3 to 5 minute videos talking about what's going on and what would be helpful. Just for time, I'll show you just a couple of examples. Here's one where Dr. Vanessa LaPointe, a psychologist, she talks about why children bite and why you don't need to worry. So you've got this video, and then you click on it, and then Vanessa gives tips and tricks and strategies to help with the children that might be biting and what you can do as a parent. But you know what we find is that teachers learn from that too. Now, here's Chaz Lewis, and he talks about when I want to feel happy, and he gives great strategies on how to help children regulate. So he goes in and he talks about it, but when you get later on, he teaches a song.
Also known as the breathe song for the young children.
I'll let you see a little snippet of it.
When I want to feel happy, I just breathe. When I want to feel happy, I just breathe. When my anger starts to grow, I just breathe through my nose.
Now, some of you are feeling better already just because now you know what to do. But you see how he talks about it like strategically, like how as a teacher I could use this, or for parents, how parents could use it. And then there's a song that goes alongside it so that we can teach it and we can remember it and we can do it. What we do is we live in this space where we equip parents to invest in their kids and their children in a way that's meaningful. We give them the tools right here. But teachers are also investing in the children, and they use those same tools right here. And we give the teachers the capacity to share this information with parents, because what we know is that parents, they're not going to take the time to search for the videos. But if you have a child that bites and you meet them and you fill out, if you have to do a report or whatever it may be, and you're communicating with them, you say, hey, this happened. We want to talk about it. We had to do this. Make sure you get the report. But I'm going to copy, paste, and send a link to a video because there's a psychologist that talks about what you can do when your child bites. So now you don't have to come up with all the answers for what's going on. You actually can give the answers. You can text it or message it or email it, and you get that in their hands right then just by looking up the video, copying the URL, pasting it and texting it or sending it whatever way. And now they can watch it wherever they are. They don't even have to sign in. They just tap and they watch and they get help. And now you're on the same team. So there's tons of ways that you can see, do it via text message, do it via email. You can send stuff across your whole center so that everybody gets it. You actually can train your staff because you might find a great video on Calming Down by Chaz Lewis, and you actually think your whole team would benefit from that. Well, just send them the link and then ask them to send you an email about, well, what did they think and how's one place where they can use it. You can even put it on your social media so that you're equipping parents even when they're just looking and trying to check out your center. And what we've done is we've created these quick reference guides where really it's based by age, like parenting a 2-year-old. We actually have them translated in multiple languages, but you've got from baby all the way to 5-year-old, the top videos that we found to be most helpful. Now, here's the whole key why I think that this is relevant. You start at the beginning and you prepare, right? You check your temperature of your classroom, you create a common language, and you just use it because that's how you are. But then you provide specific interventions based on need. And you don't start with the heavy, you start with why are they doing it, recognizing that it's communication, and then helping them solve that communication problem. And start with the simple stuff like redirection and distraction, all the way to teaching them on how to take their own time out when they need it, to maybe putting a toy in timeout. And then you go all the way down to making sure it's not just you carrying the load, that you bring in partners, that you use tools that can get parents on board while you're doing the same, and working together, you can actually create a successful environment that shapes behavior that not only makes your classroom better and it makes the experience for the child better, but it sets them up for success wherever they may go next. All right, I know that was a mouthful, and we actually could spend about 2 more hours on it, but I wanted to give you lots of tools that you could walk away with so that you can start using this information right now. Hey, Sam, I don't know if you have any questions, but I just wanted to say thank you for letting me be a part, and excited for what's next.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. I kind of know and assume that lots of the educators on this call or this webinar today will be feeling how I am, just great information. I mean, I'm a parent, and it's useful for me as much as it is in an early learning center. What I just want to say, just before we open it up for questions, just for any of the educators, directors, owners out there, if Parent TV actually sounds interesting for you and your center, one of the things I wanted to show you is we actually produced a book last year, which we're a bit excited about because it was in like all of the book places. So, you know, we managed to get it in Kmart and BW, you know, it's a big deal when your book's in Kmart. But anyway, this is it. Parents, this is the one thing you need to know. Now, this book is actually a collection of all 42 of our experts. So Maggie Dent, Dr. Justin Colson, Teacher Tom, Sandy Phoenix, Kayleen Henderson, you probably know lots of those people, who all wrote one chapter for this book. Now, and Jason's in the book as well. So in this book, each one of our experts wrote, if there was just like one thing that you had to recommend to a parent that's really important that, you know, you probably don't want to drop the ball on, what would your one thing be? So this is made up of about 35 chapters of all of some of our favorite parenting educators, one things. So what we're actually doing is, if you were interested in finding out a bit more about Parent TV and our platform and how we can help support your parents and your educators with information, if you just book a 30-minute demo with us to check it out, we will literally give you a digital copy of this book that you can send to all of your parents just for free. So that won't cost you anything. You can send them a digital copy of this. We'll send it to you and you can send that out. It's pretty amazing. People have read this book and said, this is nearly the only book you need as a parent. Just, 35 one things from the world's leading parenting educators. Now, if you all look in the chat section, I've just put a link in the chat section to my calendar, because it's me that you'll be talking to, where you can literally just make a time. It's 30 minutes. And essentially we'll just show you. So you need to think of Parent TV a little bit like Netflix or YouTube for parenting resources, where we've literally brought together the world's leading parenting educators all in the one place. We have over 2,000 videos on there. The videos go for about 5 minutes or so max, so they're short, sharp, and to the point. And all of our experts are credible. So what we do, and I guess what we offer you guys, is just credibility. So speech pathologist, occupational therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, pediatrician, and then people like Maggie and Jason. And so we've got information from, speech development to autism diagnosis to why children bite to behavior to sleep to food. You kind of name it, it's all there. And it's really just a resource to put into your hands, to put into the hands of parents. So we're just here to help. We've worked with over 500 early learning centres across Australia and in the US as well. Literally just seeing it as a tool and a support for you personally. When something's going on and you're like, we need to communicate to parents, it's always good to have reliable information that you can kind of come around together and to make your life a little bit easier. So as I said, all you need to do if you're interested, you can just book like a 30-minute demo at a time that suits you over the next few weeks. Click on the link that I just put in chat. Hopefully everyone can see that. Just find a time that works for you and it will do the rest. And after our demo, we'll also send you a copy of this book as a digital book that you can forward to all of your parents just as a gift, and you can just use it as a bit of a there's no promos or anything selling in this book. It's a proper book that costs $30 if you go to the bookstore and buy it, but we just have a digital version. So I just thought it's just really great for parents because it's got lots of helpful information. Now I can see there's some Q&A here. I don't know if you want to go to Q&A, Jason, and maybe name a website from where we can get info for parents. Oh, yeah. So it's parenttv.com. So Parent TV. But I'll also send an email out to everyone that attended just with some information about what we do as well. But click on the link, make a 30-minute appointment with me, and I can just talk to you about it as well. So I don't know if you wanted to answer any of these questions, Jason. I missed the definition of responding. Could you please show that slide again?
Yes, I can. But the main idea, reacting is, well, I'll find that slide and show it to us. And here we go. The whole key to responding is according to a plan. Reacting is just in the moment, where a response is a specific choice made according to a plan. See the website. Okay, so how to ask a child to join the group with some behavioral issues that are not identified yet, that doesn't want to engage in any of the activities rather than playing with dinosaurs. So with me, I always start where the child is, knowing that they love playing with dinosaurs. I would use that as I would first focus on location. Can I get them in the right location? Then I might allow them to go with the dinosaurs to be there. A way to think about it is it's almost like where some children sleep with a comfort blanket or whatever it may be. Not that the dinosaurs are comforting, but technically you could say where it is. But I would focus on location first, and then I would shift to participation. Because what we tend to do is kids are not even in the environment and they're misbehaving. Well, let's first get them successfully in the environment, location, and then let's look at participation and just create a step. Because many times people go from here, and they want children to be here, but let's create these little bitty steps all along the way. So that would definitely be something that I would try in that situation.
And I'll just respond to the question about recording. So yes, this has been recorded, and I will send in an email to everybody post this a link to the recording as well. So you are welcome to share it with your staff and use it for your team. And I can look at, we have issued certificates and stuff before as well. So send me an email about that. So sam@parenttv.com is my email address as well. If you want anything, that's pretty easy. But yes, I can. Yeah, Jason.
I'll share one more idea with circle time. Sometimes in the early learning settings, we think that they're leaving or because they're focused on toys or dinosaurs or specific things. And I'm not actually speaking about this situation, But one of the powerful things that I found is like when you're doing circle time or some sort of activity, the child that is giving you the most behavioral difficulties, sometimes it's about attention, and because it looks like it's something else. So maybe like I'm reading a book, and instead of saying, wow, Susie, I'm so glad you're sitting so quietly, I actually would read the book, and I would say to Susie, I might even pick a dinosaur book and say, oh, what dinosaur is this? Or what color is this dinosaur? And then I ask another child a question. So, and then I would do something, and then I might look and I might just pat them on the shoulder, and then I'm going around. See, I'm just delivering lots of attention. And we found that that actually, with the right situation, has actually eliminated a lot of behavioral problems during then. It just means I have to be intentional. And sometimes asking a question is actually attention, and it totally eliminates many of the behaviors. Doesn't always work, but many times that's where I'd start, because that's one of the easiest things to do.
Awesome. Hey, I also just want to do a big shout out to OWNA. So you probably lots of you wouldn't be here today if OWNA hadn't let you guys know. So I know some of the OWNA crew are on the call. So yes, we have done this in partnership with them. Hopefully we will be delivering more PD with them in the coming months in 2023. It's just our opportunity to, I guess, give you guys a bit of an experience of what we do here at Parent TV and some of the amazing people we work with, like Jason. And yeah, really grateful to OWNA. I know those guys do amazing work, their CCS product, all of that stuff. We've actually worked with them and built a course also, which is a complete guide to CCS, which you can reach out to OWNA about. Which is this amazing interactive course. So yes, that's probably something else worth noting as well. So thank you so much to OWNA, and thank you so much, Jason, for joining. I know it's the evening over in the US at the moment, and you're in Nashville. Thanks for jumping on and yeah, doing this today. And you'll hear from us, everybody. We'll send out a link to the recording and a bit of information about Parent TV. And thanks for everyone. I know lots of you have booked some appointments, so I will see you in the coming weeks as well for that, where yeah, there's no pressure on that. It's really just us showing you what you do, and if you feel like it might be helpful. I don't know if anybody is based in Queensland, but I know with the Kindy Uplift program, I think the work that Parent TV does kind of fits within that funding schedule. So if you do have some Kindy Uplift funding in Queensland, the work that we're doing, yeah, can kind of fit into that as well. So that's just a really good thing to know. So thanks everybody for coming along today. We hope you have a good rest of your day, and